silent, you'll not find love. Only sleepless nights. I'm just a ghost of the man I was, too weary to fight. My nights would be bad.
Hey guys, welcome to Beyond the Beard podcast, a podcast dedicated to discovering true masculinity. Today we're going to resume our series in talking about fictional characters, fictional men. But first off, guys, how was your week?
Good.
Yeah?
Yeah, really good. Very busy. Very busy. It's school year. We had came to Friday and we got a text message the night before saying that there would be no students on Friday because there was a massive issue with sewage backup at the school.
Nice.
In one area of the school, so that was kind of interesting. But yeah, I have my own personal theories of probably what happened. Come on, there's junior high boys at the school. What do you think happened? I mean, I'm guessing one of them flushed or 5 of them flushed something down. That's my guess. I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much, but so that was kind of an interesting thing. Now, most people would be like, oh, that's a nice, relaxing day. And for me, I'm like, dude, I have to sit around and grade all day and there's no kids. Like, I sign up to be a teacher because I like kids.
Right.
I sure as heck don't sign up to sit by myself in a classroom for 3, and we had to be there. So we treated it as an in-service day. So that was, I mean, I'm way ahead. I'm planned all the way through January now.
Dang.
So, but yeah, good week. Got to do a little football too with my son, which was cool. So yeah, good week. Mike, how about you?
Same thing. My daughter goes to the same school that Matt teaches at. Yeah, we told Zoe, we're like, yeah, some junior high boys did something like that. Had to be what was going on.
Yeah, poor junior high boys.
And what's
blame
great
for
is
everything.
too, like, we're gonna figure it out because junior high boys, they're dumb enough to try something like that, right? But then also they're dumb enough to talk about it. So they're gonna tell somebody something.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's only where my brain went, was because somebody else had mentioned. I heard some boys talking about that. And I'm like, well, it's gonna be found out.
Yeah.
So, somebody's gonna figure that out. But yeah, it was an interesting little day there. Thankfully, the rest of the school didn't stink. So
yeah,
that was fine. It's the rest of it that's good. But yeah, interesting week. But it's a little busy, a little crazy. But yeah, I mean, we're pretty far into the school year now, so
good.
Feeling pretty good. Enjoying it. How about you? You were gone, right?
Yeah, I was gone all week. I started a new job a couple weeks ago, and so I had got the opportunity to travel to sunny California. It was good. It was. I think I was mentioning to you guys, travel never goes, especially if in this context. It seems travel never goes the way you expect it to. So I came back on Thursday. And I was slated to leave San Jose Airport at 8 p.m., which would have put me into Denver at like 11:30. And so I got done a little bit early. And so I got to the airport and there were 2 flights to Denver. And so I went on standby, and one was at 3, one was at 5. And I was like, well, sweet. If I can't get on the 3 o'clock one, I can probably get on the 5 o'clock one, which will like put me into Denver at a reasonable time. I can get home because it's like an hour and a half drive from the DIA.
Yep.
And so I get to the gate and I'm waiting and everybody boards and the gate agent looks at me and she's like, oh, are you supposed to be on this flight? And I'm like, well, I'm on standby. And she's like, oh, go get cleared at the desk. And so I go over to the desk and I'm like, oh, hey, I'm gonna, I need to get cleared. And the gate agent like has this like slight panicked look. And as I was walking up to the desk, she sent another guy over to the gate. And I'm pretty sure he was on standby. Now, I'd like to point out, I was the first person on standby for this flight.
So
I walk up to the gate, and she's like, kind of like has this weird, sort of flustered, panicked, sort of like, and I want to preface this. I had talked to her prior, so when I got to the gate, I was like, hey, I'm on standby. She's like, oh, we're not going to clear you until like 10 minutes before they leave. And the flight was already like 20 minutes late, and so anyway. And she's like, well, your baggage. She's like, oh, it's like gray. Like she like shows me on the screen like gray icon. She's like, it's like a ghost bag. It looks like it got checked into the 8 o'clock flight, and so you can't get on this flight. And I was like, wait, no, seriously? She's like, no, you can't get on the flight. there was one seat left on this flight, so I'm pretty sure she cleared the other guy and he got on.
Yep, and
so I was like, okay, well, can I just get on the 5 o'clock? She's like, no, you can't. I was like, wait, so I have to wait till 8 o'clock? And she's like, yeah. So I got to the airport at 1:50. So I wait. My flight is 20 minutes late at 8 o'clock. So I get on board at 8:20. Well, we leave at 8:20, get into DA at about 11:45, get back, waiting for my baggage. It's, basically the baggage carousel doesn't start until about 12:35, 12:40. So I've been sitting there we got to the gate at, I think we deplaned at like 11:45. So I've been there for almost an hour waiting for my baggage. All the bags come out. My bag is not in that. The thing stops. I'm like, okay. So I walk over to the people that help with that. And I was like, hey, this is the situation. And they go, well, first off, that's a lie. They could have had you get on the plane. There was no reason you couldn't have gotten on any of those flights. And I was like, sweet. And they're like, oh, and by the way, your bag came in on the 3 o'clock flight, which is where it was supposed to be, because that's where I checked it in.
Or the one that you checked in.
Yeah. And they're like, okay, so but it's in the office. I'm like, okay, so I go over to the office, and they're like, oh yeah, come back here. Which one's yours? And I'm looking around. I'm like, well, none of these are mine.
Oh, no.
And so basically, after a bunch of calls, they finally find it. It is 1 o'clock in the morning at this point, and so I got home at 2:30 yesterday morning.
Jeez, dude.
And then had to get up and take the kids to school at 7 o'clock. So
yep,
it's
when you were supposed to be on a 3.
Well, I my original flight was at 8, so it's whatever. But the gate agent messing up, like, I understand. Like, you see those people yelling at the gate agent.
Yep.
No, I get it. Part of the reason that like I was not abusive was because
they already
she's
have
in
enough to
another
deal with.
state and I can't go find her. Like, I was so mad. Like, I wasn't going to actually do anything, but I was just so incredibly angry. So that was other than that, my trip was good. So,
Well, I'm glad that your trip was good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into it, Matt.
Yeah. So, so today we're going to jump back into fictional characters, and we're going to stick with our series on Lord of the Rings. So
Cool.
The first one we did was, if you remember, which character did we first do?
We did Aragorn.
We did Aragorn, yeah. So today we're going to take a look at another man of the West, which is a great description of this person. But we're jumping into the second book this time. So for those of you that don't know the story of Lord of the Rings, so we have, I don't want to go into the whole full thing, but we have Sauron, Dark Lord, creates the Ring of Power, where he pours in his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life, and is slowly conquering Middle-earth, gets pushed back by a last alliance of men and elves, and is defeated. The ring is cut from his finger by a man named Isildur, who is the son of Elendil, who comes from, this ancient country of Numenor that's destroyed by a flood and all this stuff, right? So anyways, the ring survives because Isildur cannot let it go. He keeps it as a trophy, right? And he's supposed to destroy it, but can't do it. And if anybody is familiar with the story, you know that the Ring of Power is, of course, it's full of all of that evil of Sauron, but it's his actual soul, right? It's his actual essence and being. And so anyone who wields it will be used for evil, right? You cannot resist the power of the ring, doesn't matter who you are. And so I bring that up because the point in the story that we're in when we pick this up is Frodo has chosen to take the ring to Mordor to finally destroy it. We have the Fellowship of the Ring, where he has 8 companions with him. It's Fellowship of 9, right? And eventually the Fellowship breaks as Boromir betrays them, tries to take the ring for himself again, giving into that desire for power.
Mm-hmm.
And Boromir is he is the son of the Steward of Gondor, which is the most powerful realm of men at the time in when the book is occurring. And it's important to know this because Boromir is a mighty warrior, right? But he has fears, right? Just like any man would.
Yeah.
He is afraid, and he gives into those fears. And he sees the ring as the only way to save his country, his city, right? His people. So it's a heart of good, right?
Right.
The desire to do good, but through him it would wield an evil power. And so he ends up failing to take the ring from Frodo. Frodo and Sam escape across the river to the other side and begin taking it to Mordor. The rest of the Fellowship go to to help Merry and Pippin, who are captured two other hobbits. And Boromir is killed defending Merry and Pippin. It's a great scene. If you haven't seen it or read the books, I encourage you to. It's a great redemptive scene for a character who we just saw this failure in slow motion, right? The entire time in Boromir. But he has this redemptive arc at the very end, and it's fantastic. And again, it brings me back to we'll do a whole thing on Boromir, so I don't want to get into that too much, but we have to talk about him because the character today that we're going to talk about is he is a huge part of that because it is his younger brother, Faramir. And so where we pick up in the story is Sam and Frodo are trying to take the ring to Mordor. They run into an area called Ithilien, and they run into a group of rangers led by Faramir. Now, this is the book. It's very different than the movie, and I want to point that out. So those of you who have seen the movie and that's what you're basing this off of, you will notice that the character of Faramir in the books is vastly different from the character in the movies.
And just so I'm tracking. Right. So we have Gondor, which is kind of like the last line of defense against Mordor at this time, right? And it's who did you mention the father, the steward?
Yes, steward of Gondor, and his name is Denethor.
Okay, so you have Denethor, and then you have his two sons, Boromir and
Faramir. And Boromir is, and they increase this in the movie a bit. I'll have to go back in the book. I mean, I read them like literally like once a year, but I didn't pick up as much. I think they emphasized that like disappointment in Faramir a little bit more in the movie than in the book. But it's a good character arc and story. But yeah, he is very proud of Boromir, not as much of Faramir, the younger brother. And he is Boromir is sort of like his pride and joy, his firstborn son, right? And so we get to this point where Frodo and Sam are actually sitting there talking with Faramir. And this is where Frodo finally tells him, yes, I have the ring. Yes, I'm taking it to Mordor and I need to destroy it. And so this is where we get to see, I'm just going to read you guys a quote. Okay. And Mike, this can be tough for you as always, but our goal is to take this one quote, this one scene, and try to see what we can learn about this character and about masculinity and about being good men just from this single quote. So they're in Ithilien, they're in this camp, they're talking with Faramir. And so Boromir, of course, is he gave in to the power of the ring.
Yes.
And tried to take it from Frodo. And so now he meets Faramir, Boromir's brother.
Right.
And that's what makes it such an interesting point. So I'm going to start here and I'll read just a little more. So he's talking to Faramir and he tells him about the ring, right? So Frodo's talking to him. So Faramir says, "But fear no more. I would not take this thing. If it lay by the highway, or even if it lay by the highway, not were Minas Tirith falling into ruin and I alone could save her. So using the weapon of the Dark Lord for her good and my glory. No, I do not wish for such triumphs, Frodo, son of Drogo." "Neither did the council," said Frodo, "nor do I. I would have nothing to do with such matters." "For myself," said Faramir, "I would see the white tree in flower again in the courts of the kings, and the silver crown return, and Minas Tirith in peace. Minas Anor again, as of old, full of light, high and fair, beautiful as a queen among other queens, not a mistress of many slaves, nay, not even a kind mistress of willing slaves. War must be, while we defend our lives against a destroyer who would devour all. But I do not love the bright sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory. I only love that which they defend, the city of the men of Numenor, and I would have loved her for her memory, her ancestry, her beauty, and her present wisdom, not feared, save as men may fear the dignity of a man, but old and wise." First impressions, first thoughts.
His nobility is just shines through that entire scene. Like, I think he has the right intention and motive that is driving every action he's doing, right? You believe him when he's saying this, because he doesn't just go like, well, even if the ring was right there, I wouldn't pick it up. He goes, if the ring wasn't there, I wouldn't pick it up. I wouldn't try to use it. I wouldn't try to ever do anything with it. And this is why. Because what I want to see is I want to see Minas Tirith return to glory.
Yep. His city, yes.
Yeah, his city.
And initially, so at this point in the story, Minas Tirith is the capital of Gondor.
Yes.
Initially, it was a city called Osgiliath, which is under siege at that moment.
Yeah.
Or not, I don't think exactly at that moment.
No, they
in
they'd
the book
taken
there, yeah. And so, but I do think it's interesting. The first thing you mentioned was like, even if we're laying on the side of the road and Minas Tirith were in flames.
Yep.
So even if all hope is lost, I still wouldn't even reach for that thing.
Yeah.
Like what a wild quote.
Yeah, I think
if you think about that, like
it's the thing that stands out to me, and we've talked about this a little bit before, that some of these characters are going to be that idealized character. They're going to have those idealized values.
Absolutely.
And so I hear this, and yes, I think that there is a wrestling that I think we all have to do of why we do things or what we would do. And so I put myself in that predicament, right?
Yep.
If I had the power to save a city, right? But to do that, I had to do something that was evil or interact with something that was evil. I think it'd be very difficult for me myself
to say no,
right? Because and you quoted it earlier, or no, I think Gandalf says it, like I would take the ring with the intention to do good, but only great evil would be wielded through me. And so that idea of really understanding the true power and intent and malice behind the ring, and understanding the impact of that, because I think we spend so much time thinking about immediate benefits.
Yep.
We spend so much time thinking about, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and this is going to result in solving this problem, or it's going to, but that problem is usually like right here in front of us. We don't go, we don't look at it down the road. And so I think the cool thing about Faramir is he has a complete understanding of how evil this is, and his desire to do good, and really understanding, okay, I would intend to do great things with this and save my city, but I know that wouldn't actually happen.
So here's an interesting question with what you just said about in there. What kind of virtue is he demonstrating?
I mean, there's a lot of self-control demonstrated.
Absolutely.
There.
Yep.
Like there is a lot of self-control, because even we oftentimes think of self-control as having to resist against something that's bad, right? Whether that's, diet, we like, well, I need to be strict with this, and not that food is bad, but I'm being strict with my diet because I want to, achieve all these health benefits, right? And so I'm having to say no to all these tasty things that I really enjoy, right? And so we think of it in a kind of, I don't want to say negative context, but it's always used to, not always, but it's used to kind of fight against or go against things that are not good for us, right?
Yes.
Self-control. But in this moment, he has this good desire. And so his self-control is coming through saying, even though I want to do good, bad will result. And so I am controlling even my good intentions. So that's the first thing I think of, the first value.
There's a word that it actually mentioned it in there that I immediately think of when you hear a quote like that, where it's like, yes, sure, we have this power, we could use it.
Yeah.
But I also have the forethought not to, even in this desperate moment.
Yes.
I like the term self-control. The other one I thought of, and it was in there, was wisdom.
Yeah.
True understanding. Like that's what I think defining wisdom can be hard at sometimes. Sometimes people call it the application of knowledge. I would say yes, but it's also like the true understanding of virtue, and the application of it is wisdom.
Yeah.
Right? The true application of it is wisdom. And you see it in this moment. He doesn't just think, okay, I'm desperate in this moment. He thinks, okay, but if I'm victorious, at what cost?
Yeah.
Will I be victorious, or will this just be a different form of defeat?
Right.
And not only was I defeated, but I also violated what I stand for. And so I think that's one of the more interesting, just thoughts. It's like, wow, he had the foresight. Right now, again, it's a fictional character, but there are times where I wonder how many times our leaders could have used a power and then chose not to because they had a forethought that was like, man, probably shouldn't do that.
Well, and I think for me, that's why I immediately said nobility, because when I think of nobility, a lot of times it is mentioned with people who are royal or people who are of higher station.
Yes.
it's really related to, I always think of like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight or right, like those kinds of writings. But when I think of nobility, I think of wisdom as a huge component, I think, of being a noble person. And so I'm in the mental health field, and dialectical behavioral therapy talks about something called wise mind. And it is this state. So people who are struggling with anxiety and depression, a lot of times they are operating on two extremes. They're either operating in an emotional state, or they're operating in this like hyper logical state. And while neither one of these states are negative in and of themselves, when you are solely operating in one of those realms, you can't reap the benefit of the other. So if I'm hyper logical, well, I can do all of these things, but the things like emotions like charity and kindness and gentleness, those don't play into your decisions.
Yeah.
Right. And on the other side, you have, this emotional state where all of your feelings are running everything that you're doing, but you can't apply logical solutions in those scenarios. And so this idea of wise mind and DBT is really built to help clients get into the state of, it's this balance between these two things. And I think what you're seeing,
talking about a golden mean? Is that what you're
I mean, I'm not talking about that. I think you're talking about that.
I was discussing Aristotle with my students this week. Seventh graders.
Golden. Yeah, exactly. And so it is that balance. And you see it exemplified in Faramir right here, because right, the initial, like, I want to do this because I want to make my city better. I want to protect my people. And then you also see the logical going, I can not only see how this would apply, right? But I can see where it would be of benefit. And you see them you see them married, because he goes, I understand what it could do. I understand my obligation to my city. Yeah. And yet I have the foresight, I have the wisdom to look down the road and go, yeah, that's going to be a bad deal.
Yep.
Like that.
And how hard is that?
Incredibly difficult.
Like if you had the choice between like, I need to save my family and I have this power that would let me do it, but the corruption that would come because of the cost. Mike looks really excited over there. Are you thinking superheroes? Because that's usually what I think of.
Not really excited. I just kind of started thinking it the other way around. Like, we're talking about like his impact on his kingdom. People.
Yeah.
And how he's thinking about it. I was just thinking through like modern day, when we have those, we don't have rings of power, right? But we do have decisions. We do have levers we can pull that are somewhat less power, right? And it's more of the ability to have the integrity and consistency within yourself. Be like, I'm going to be a good man. This is what I think a good man is. I'm going to make sure that all my actions do that. Because as soon as you start pulling on those, using the ring of power, it's not necessarily that through him great evil will be done. It will turn him into great evil over time, and then great evil will be done. Right. So I think of that in the modern day, where it's like people go, you know what, the ends justify the means. I'm like, yes, but how many times you do that will then change who you are.
Yes.
So I think one important thing to pull from that isn't necessarily even like the wisdom. Yeah, you can see it and you can weigh the balances.
Yes.
You can be logical and emotional about it, but the one thing that a lot of people fail to do when they're justifying those decisions of doing something wrong is you're taking a small step at deprecating who you were, the honorable good man you were, and taking a step towards being a bad or evil man, or taking a step and you're not having that integrity to yourself. And that's what the great evil.
And I think it's interesting you bring that up, because I was going to actually ask a little bit about that idea of power, right? And how, we don't, like you said, we don't have rings of power, but we have people who have power. How many times do we see people who go, and I'd be curious to really dive into people who go into like politics for good reasons.
Well, what is this saying? Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yep. And I mean, what is the ring? It's absolute power.
It is. Yeah.
And I think the amount of wisdom and, like you said, self-control, but self-awareness to recognize, like this power, this power that I obtain. Yeah, sure. I maybe I could use it at first for good, but power corrupts. And once you have it, are you really going to give it up?
No, I mean, power, and we see it in the government, and I've always said this, like, governments are a black hole for power. Period. Nothing is ever returned. It is just absorbed.
Once government gets something, it's not going to give it up.
Right. Yeah. And people are the same way. It's interesting. You said something about, how many politicians do we think go in with good intentions? I will tell you that probably more often than not, most of them don't.
I was
I
wondering
will
that.
tell you. So here's the thing, and
next
this is
question.
just some of my own lived experience and observations, and so this is very anecdotal. But what I see, so I've had the opportunity to interact with people in all different kinds of levels of government, whether that's senators, whether that is local government, and it's interesting because essentially there's probably some elected positions now that don't take a lot to get, as far as like campaigning and so I think of like maybe school boards, right? Like it is a political process, but it's probably not as politically contentious as, say, I don't know, being elected mayor,
Yeah.
right? It's interesting because, and I've just heard this from people and I've observed it, as people progress, if your goal, right, if you're going into politics because you want to make a difference, you get into politics and then you realize, oh, I can't continue forward unless I do certain things.
Yep.
I have to, in order for me to be successful, I have to play the game this way, or I have to engage in this kind of mudslinging, or whatever, whatever you want to term it. And so I would bet that what we tend to observe nationally, what we tend to observe in the media, I would say a lot of those folks have really gone into that spot of they have said the ends justify the means so many times that what they perceive are like their good intentions are really not for the
Good
benefit of
intentions
others
anymore.
Yeah, no. And so I do think that most of those people, and again, I'm sure there are some in there that have a good heart or have like want to do. I think most of those people want to be seen as they've benefited society.
They want to be perceived that way.
Absolutely. But I think that when you look at what they do, it's very, very self-centered and selfish.
I think it's also the desire for control, right?
Yes.
Like we all want control. We all want to be in control.
Yeah.
When we're in control of our own lives, that feels good, right? Feels safe.
Yes.
And so if you can get into a point where you can be in control not only of your life, but everybody else's, and you truly believe, and again, I think we're getting into a lot of speculation here, but again, there's a lot of different personalities in there. Some of them, maybe in there to do good things, and that's what they think, but they're doing not good things. There are people in there who are like, I'm in here to benefit myself. Then you have people who are there to, it becomes almost an ego thing, right? Like I'm the one in control. I can't be wrong. And so you have that a lot, but bringing it back to Faramir, you have someone who is aware of those failings.
Yes.
And if we compare that to, let's say, his brother,
right,
or even his father,
yes,
maybe that's why he has the viewpoint he does. I can tell you right now, when I was growing up, I got to watch a lot of people, there was one family member in particular who'd made a lot of bad decisions.
Sure.
And I got to watch him do that.
Yep.
And I got to watch his friends make bad decisions.
You mean so you watched the dad and you watched?
No, I watched my brother, and then I watched his friends.
Oh, okay.
make bad decisions.
Okay.
Yeah. And my brother will tell you that he often asks me like, "Hey, do you talk to your students about me?" And I'm like, every once in a while, yeah. And he'll be like, "Do you tell them how much I regret it?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah."
Dang.
Because he made a lot of bad decisions. Now, where my brother is now in life is amazing. The guy's incredible.
Right.
But it took him a while to get there, and he had to work extremely hard to get out of that hole he dug. And I bring that up because I got to watch that, and I'm wondering, like, how much did Faramir, like, obviously we're approaching this from the point of view of readers, but if we apply like sort of like a realistic view to this, if he's seeing his father, right, who is the steward of Gondor, who doesn't want to give up power, who wants to maintain that power, and then he has his older brother who's a bit prideful, right, and we see people who, we've talked about this before, with confidence and pride and arrogance, but this idea of there is a line between those. And sometimes Boromir flirts with arrogance, right? And we can see it in the books and especially in the movies as well. And this idea that, he believes he's capable of handling that power.
Yes.
But usually the people who think they can handle the power are usually the most dangerous, right?
Yeah. Usually.
Why?
Well, actually, there's...
Go ahead. I know. I was going to say. I
knew that a lot, actually. I actually want to go back to one thing.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I was just thinking, when you're talking about like the power dynamics that they're all struggling with, I think it's interesting because the lines where he's talking about, I don't care about the swords and the arrows and stuff like that.
Yes.
Like, in that age, that is the representation of power. Because that's how kingdoms wielded power. So it's like, I don't care about their uses of these means of war. I care about the end that it is, which I think that's a great statement because it takes away the pride of like, I don't care to be this warrior who's getting fame. I don't care to wield the power to be able to hold it over somebody else. I am simply, I don't care about any of those tools. And the tools are usually what people are after, right? People who want power, the power is you have access to send armies and go do things. Right? He's like, I don't care about them. I care about my country.
And I love that you brought that because again, that idea of I don't love the sword, I don't love the weapons. Yeah. I only love that which they defend.
Exactly. Not even what they're able to do, but what they are able to defend.
Yeah,
like
what
that,
they're
wild,
used for.
Which is wild.
I'm like, it's a very good word choice by Tolkien. I'd say it's really well structured as because somebody who's going to argue and nitpick things semantically. I'm like, well,
you can't.
I mean, he had his buddy C.S. Lewis to kind of go at it.
These guys were okay writers, I guess.
They were sort of smart.
But and then sorry, I wanted to go on that.
No, keep going. No,
but I think it's interesting because you said, what was it? What was it? Power.
Which one?
You were just asking. You were at.
Oh, the brothers. You mean? And the dad.
How would they be like susceptible to it? And I was gonna say an interesting thing is I like cons and con games and and heists and all that. What guy doesn't like heists?
It's interesting.
So there's a great book called The Confidence Game, and it breaks down how cons run. It talks to you about like what a couple of main ones are, what people look for in targets and marks and stuff like that, how the teams are composed, things of this nature. And the reason I like this is I struggle with understanding people a lot. So I like psychology. I like behavioral and social psychology because I just don't understand things. So I read a lot of books on them. And whether or not I understand them is a different thing. But it talks about how most cons are essentially people who are really good at reading the psychological state of somebody else. Their intention, their mood, their disposition, how they're going to behave, and how they would respond to things. It's really well known. People who are often in law enforcement have this arrogance about them. Like, I would never get pickpocketed. I would never get conned.
Sure.
And then you go talk to con artists. They're like, dude, they are number one targets because they let their defenses down because they think they're impenetrable.
False sense of security.
Yes. They're like, whereas a Mark who thinks they are vulnerable has a heightened sense of awareness typically. So they're paying attention. Whereas a guy who's like, you can never take advantage of me because I'm too good at this. I would never fall. They are the most susceptible. So ironically, like when Boromir is like, I could handle this ring of power. It's like, you're
its main target.
The way he writes it is beautiful because it's like it matches what we see in the world. Whereas these people who think that they can wield the power, like you said, are going to be corrupted by it or fall to it because they think they can't.
Yeah.
So everything that you would normally do to safeguard yourself, right? And we do that in the world today. Like, my willpower is too strong to fall to pornography. I can do whatever. Okay, well then you don't have safeguards. You don't have people who you can be. Check
or how many times have you heard about guys who have friends, right? They're married, but then they have girlfriends.
Yeah. I would never do anything. But then they go, I can go to lunch with her by ourselves and it's fine.
It's just, you're setting yourself up for that failure.
Even other little things like I can critique my coworker and give him some negative comment just between you and us. Like, I'm not really gossiping about him or bashing him.
Right.
How long do you do that until it expands to you genuinely are have a very negative outlook upon me and you treat them different, right? Like these little steps towards doing things because you think you're impenetrable to that little step are what breaks strong men.
Yeah. It's interesting. What we are talking about right here is two things. One, you asked the question about how much of Faramir is because he observed his dad and his brother, right? And what we're talking about is biopsychosocial theory in that there's two things that I think come into play here. First off, you have, right, there used to be is it nature, is it nurture? And really from a psychology's perspective now, we understand that it's both. That both those play into how people are developed, but then it's also what we are like what our experiences and what our psychological state also, it plays a role in that. And so because you see this where you have people who are in the exact same environment, exact same,
you mean the psychological state at the time?
Absolutely. Yes.
Sorry, I'm listening. I'm like, I know we're talking about nature and nurture, and then at the time the nature effect comes in.
And I'm probably butchering it a little bit.
No, you're good. I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah, but so I think that is at play, and that is part of like what is influencing him here, right? It is that he is seeing all these things. But there's another thing I think that it's also important too, and you mentioned it without saying it exactly, but it's being self-aware. Understand, because here's the thing is it is not a bad thing to be confident, right? It is not a bad thing to go, I don't think I would fall to that, or I don't like. It is not a bad thing to have those thoughts. If you arrogantly act on those things, right? Like that's where you get yourself into trouble. And so as you guys were talking about that, I was thinking, okay, well, what about people who are naturally that way, right? Like that's naturally how they are, because you'll have people who just are very, I have a buddy, he really believes that like what he is saying and what he is telling people to do is the right thing. And he believes he's 100% correct. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that if you're self-aware, because if you understand that about yourself, then you can go, okay, I believe this 100%. However, let me just verify that this is accurate.
Yeah.
Right. Because otherwise you're just going to charge off and do things. And then you're going to find yourself, in a place you don't want to be. And so Faramir, what I think we see here is a very self-aware character. He understands not only, and I think the reason and we're reading between the lines, or at least I'm reading between the lines a little bit here. He not only understands the impact of what the ring would do, he also understands what would happen to him if he were to interact with it.
Yes.
Right. And so he's not even going to go near it.
So here's an interesting observation then. What character trait is that? Being able to see in yourself your own weaknesses and being aware of those.
Self-awareness?
Yeah, I was going to say self-awareness.
Something else.
You're going to have to answer that.
Humility.
I don't know if humility is the same thing as, I don't think those are the same.
You don't
I would
think,
disagree, yeah.
I would say semantically they're different. I would say like,
but
if we agree in the context of a conversation sometimes, sure.
No, I'm
But I
trying
don't
to
think
expand it. I mean, so I do think there's self-awareness there, but how many people do you know aren't self-aware because their ego gets in the way? They can't handle that because of the pride, right?
Yes.
I can also do it the other way. I can have humility and be completely not self-aware.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, but would that still be humility, or would that be self-deprivation?
It could be still humility.
So?
Yeah. Well, so for example, at a certain, like, I have a hard time, I'm going to do this because I'm supposed to be doing my camera. I have a hard time interacting socially on all things. I don't know what my impact is most of the time. We've had conversations where I can get people riled up and I am not tracking that at all. That's technically part of being self-aware. I'm aware of how I am impacting the world around me in a realistic manner. Right?
Okay.
I'm saying that's part of it. I'm not saying that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with humility. That has to do with my ability to be aware of who I am and what it is I'm impacting. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So to expand on that, I would say you can be self-aware and not humble, but you cannot be humble and not be self-aware.
I think that's what I'm going for.
I don't know. You might be right.
Because
I would have to think about that more because I don't have a good argument.
Sure.
I want to argue because it's me.
Well, and I think the whole reason why I brought that up is you listen to the way Faramir talks versus the way Boromir talks. Boromir speaks with that confidence, even bordering on arrogance and pride.
Yeah.
Faramir speaks with humility. I don't even want to pick that up if it lays on the side of the road. I know what it's going to do.
Yeah.
I know because what is he really admitting? I know I can't handle it.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
And I guess, and maybe the reason why I brought this up is, as a man, how much humility does it take as a man to say, I can't handle that?
Oh, yeah. No,
because I think that's
the most,
I think that's a very
I see what you're saying.
oppositional idea to honestly the nature of men. I'm not saying that's masculinity, by the way. I think humility is a big part of masculinity.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that's where I'm trying to go with this, is this idea that he's demonstrating.
I think like in the context of this writing, like, yes, very much so. I would, like, in the general terms, I'd have to rethink some things, but I think in this situation with the book, like, I think that is one thing that the author is trying to portray.
I mean, because think about it, who handles the ring the most and who handles it the best? The hobbits. These little people who, what do they value most in life? Good food and good cheer.
Yeah.
Don't they have like a natural intolerance to it or something like that?
No, but that's why, is because they don't want power. They what do they value?
Happy.
They're not like men or elves, or they don't value the power or anything. What do they want? They want that good food, good cheer, the relationships with other people. That's a lot of what and that's why Frodo is so resilient to it, because he doesn't want it. He doesn't even have. And now eventually, does it corrupt him?
Does it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And so even with those right intentions and the good, the good heart and soul, you still see that eventual corruption.
Yeah.
And so again, that's why I think that idea of term limits for a president is just such a brilliant idea. and then term limits for anyone in your government
yeah.
to prevent those lifelong politicians. I think that's vital, because otherwise it's just, even if you have the best people in there, it's a slow corruption.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. As you explain that, yeah, I guess he is showing humility there. I think I tend to think of humility in relation to people, not necessarily like circumstances, if that makes sense. But I think that's right.
I view humility a lot like I view integrity. A lot of times when we say integrity, we mean doing the right thing when no one's watching. But integrity also means doing the right thing even if it's going to cost you,
Right.
because you know it's the right thing, right? And in this case, you see a lot of integrity from Faramir, and you see a lot of humility, because I think part of humility is understanding, recognizing your faults and saying, I can't handle that, and I know it.
Yeah.
Right? Like having a realistic view of yourself in the way that, again, I think that is self-awareness. But like you said, I don't know if you can be humble without being self-aware. Is that what you said?
Yes, that is exactly what I said.
I
If
would
you're not
argue
aware
that,
of
even if I
yourself-
wanted to argue it, I would say like that one is highly beneficial for the other. Like if you want to become a more humble person, a good step would be like start just collecting data on yourself, being aware of what it is.
Yeah.
And then you can start forming the humility. I think it would make it an easier path. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that could be like a chicken and an egg kind of thing.
Because like I said, I'm not saying, I keep on putting my card up. I'm not saying you're wrong or even disagree.
No, I
with
know
you.
you're
I'm
not.
just like, I don't want to commit to that because I want to think through it a little bit more. But I do think, like, even when we were talking about creating mental fortitude, my opinion is get somebody to the gym or put them into boot camp, like force their body to start doing something because it's a good pathway to start then forming that.
Yeah.
Right.
This is a very similar thing where I'm like, if I want somebody to start forming humility, the first thing I would do is, okay, pay attention to who you are and how you're impacting things. How are you evaluating yourself, right? And start setting up the process to evaluate yourself.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I brought up a little bit about that idea of, again, him viewing his father and his brother. Because again, I did grow up getting to see my brother and his friends make bad decisions.
Yeah.
And then I looked at that and I looked at the results and I was like, I really don't want that.
Yeah.
And then I looked at people who were making good decisions and different decisions, and I thought, whoa, that's what I want. And so that's, and I look at someone like Faramir and I wonder how much of his was looking at his brother and his dad, seeing some of their failures and being like, I don't really want that. I need to be different,
But this is also why I brought up the whole like biopsychosocial thing, because that's part of who he is as a person.
Yes.
Right. I think that also lends to it, is his dad and his brother are different people. And this is part of his personality. It is crafted probably from watching his brother and dad, but also like there are components that are completely unique to him that make him this way.
Even that ability to observe the modeling that's been shown for him, right?
Yeah.
That is in some people a natural character trait,
Yes.
you're saying, which would fall in line with what you're proposing. And I would agree with that, because like, for example, Matt, you did that. Why does not every second or third or last child do that? Because they don't. Some of them follow in the exact same destructive patterns, right?
Yeah.
So it is. I do think Tim is right. I think there's an element of that's involved.
So I wanna focus on Faramir again here, because we got like that single quote.
Yeah.
But do you guys know any more about him from the books? How it's very different from the movies. I want to bring that up because I think this is where we get into the aspects of masculinity.
Yeah.
Could you put up those pictures, Mike, for us real quick?
Maybe.
I think these are some of the best. There's two pictures here that we want to show. And I think they encapsulate Faramir and his masculinity quite a bit here. First of all, you see the one on the right. We see the warrior, right?
Yep.
We see the fighter. In the books, he is a very capable warrior. In fact, he's in the third book, he is wounded, being the last man defending his men as they're retreating from Osgiliath.
Yeah.
In the movies, they make it a lot dumber, and I hated that. That bothered me so much.
That was the worst part about the movies.
It really butchered his character, because in the books, he is willing to sacrifice himself for his men, which again, leadership, right?
Yep.
The leader should always be the last one out, the first one in, right? That's a true leader. And you see that in Faramir.
Right.
Again, an aspect of masculinity, leadership. I do think that men were made to be leaders. You look at it throughout all of history.
Yeah.
We talked about various cultures. There are those threads of leadership. You see it within him. You see the warrior aspect, the defender, the protector, right?
Yep.
So you see that
Yep.
in this image, and it's awesome. You see the nobility,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
The regal, almost air to him, right? And you
Yes.
feel it in the book when you hear him say, I don't love the sword and the arrow for their sharpness or what. I love only that which they defend. I care about the people. I care about our country, our legacy, who we are, the goodness, right? He mentions that too.
Yep.
Goodness.
Yep.
And then in the second picture, I think this is a big one too. You see the care for others, right? And if you guys don't know, a great sort of side story there is with him and Eowyn, who is a princess of Rohan, and a great kind of scene and romance there between them. But I think that's a big part of masculinity as well, is finding a good woman. I think that's a big, and serving your wife, service and all of that. That's a big part of masculinity. You see this in him, the way he serves. And you got to realize he's in the position to take the ring back to his father, to impress his father and supposedly save his country.
Right.
And he says, not if it were even laying by the side of the road would I pick it up.
Yep.
And I again, you see these varying aspects of masculinity in Faramir. And again, I think Boromir is actually the more realistic character. I think when we do an episode on him, we definitely should, because I watched a video on that. Somebody said Boromir is easily the most accurate representation of a true man, of true masculinity, and also the failure.
Yep.
And then coming back from it. And I want to do an episode on that. But I love the dichotomy between Faramir and Boromir. Boromir is significantly more capable as a warrior.
Yeah.
Significantly better leader. Charismatic. He has the size, the strength,
right,
the confidence.
Right.
But all of that is not when it comes to dealing with the power of the ring.
Right.
In fact, it's a detriment.
Right.
But when you have a man like Faramir, like, that's an advantage.
Yeah.
Is that bit of humility and that understanding, no, I am too weak to handle this. We all are. Right. And that's why it needs to be destroyed. And what in a humbling and just kind of inspiring just section of the book that is when you meet him. And it's just so positive, so uplifting to see a man like that.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you pointed out, like, brought up his whole relationship with Eowyn, because it's interesting, right? The time period that this is written in, right? Was it the 40s?
I believe he wrote it in the 40s. Yeah, it's 40s and 30s.
Yeah, something like that. So this is, World War II-ish time period. A time period that's currently, attacked a lot for, the patriarchy and, like, the way that and I'm not just this exact time period, but essentially, like, setting up this, like, hey, look back at, in this time period and look at how women were treated and look at how men were and all this stuff. And you look at this relationship and between Faramir and Eowyn. Eowyn's not some damsel in distress.
Nope.
Like, for all the people who are aching for a strong female character, go read Eowyn.
Well,
like, she is awesome.
She established the trope of, like, that strong female warrior, the shield maiden, right?
Yes.
Like, she established that trope in fantasy. Like, that is where it started.
Yeah.
But she's no less feminine, right?
Yes. So what I'm getting at is it's interesting that you have an author at this time period in England. In England? Yeah,
yes.
England.
Yep.
Writing this kind of character, and then these two characters are able to have this really amazing, beautiful relationship.
Yep.
That highlights their femininity and masculinity.
Yes, and that's what I was gonna say. That's why I put that picture in there. Is you can still see the feminine and masculine roles. You see them within men and women.
Yes, and
you see how, again, ladies, that doesn't mean that you're weak or incapable of courage. It's executed differently, right?
Yep.
But in this case, you still have the masculine and feminine roles, and you still see them falling into those, and that's how you have this healthy relationship.
Yep.
And I do love that about Eowyn and Faramir. And it's one of those things that this is why these fictional stories are so important, because they give us things to aspire to. Yeah, they may not be actually attainable.
Yep.
But the idea is that we want something good to aim for. We aim for perfection, knowing we full well won't reach it.
Yep.
But on the way, we try to reach excellence, right? That's the idea.
Yep.
And I love seeing it in these fictional characters. And Tolkien understood that. He understood that you needed people to look up to. Yes, he has realistic characters. Boromir is the most realistic character.
Yeah.
How many of us would fall to the power of the ring? All of us would, right?
Yeah.
I think there's very few people who wouldn't, but
Yeah.
those people tend to be the most humble, the most gracious, the people who understand that the good things in life are the things that involve others and sacrifice and
Sure.
putting others first. And that's what should be valued, not wealth and power and, control, whatever else you want to call it. It's just so cool to see a man in a position of nobility, right? Who understands. Like, who would you rather be ruled by, Boromir or Faramir?
Oh gosh, fair.
Who would you rather be in charge? Yeah.
Easy.
Now,
No,
again,
yeah.
that doesn't mean that, again, power does corrupt. But if you were to pick this ideal person
Sure.
to rule, I would, because would he create a realm where that power and
Yes.
corruption would be available
Yes.
to himself?
No,
You
yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
No.
no.
He would be the
Yeah.
opposite. Yeah. And
That's what I'm
you
saying.
see it, and it's like, that's the kind of man I want to be. That's the kind of man, that's the kind of leader I want to be. I want to be the guy who's
Yeah.
first in, last out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like that's good leadership, and you see it in him, not just with the masculinity, but with through his masculinity, not just with the warrior side,
No.
but with that side of almost like the philosopher, right?
I was just gonna say. I mean, really, our interactions with him in the book, if I remember right, a lot of them aren't him fighting. Some of them
most
are,
of them are philosophical, like discussions,
Yeah.
and
and it's
him talking
interesting.
with Sam and Frodo. Yeah,
I was going to ask you this. I mean, okay, so like, let's just like, this is almost 100 years ago, right?
Yep.
When this
I
was
think it's
written.
80.
Yeah.
Could you check the date when it was published? Because I can't remember. I had it written down, and I should know it, and I can't remember.
Well, I mean, okay, regardless, the authors, right,
Oh, yeah.
are
Over 100
influenced,
years, yes.
yeah, influenced by what was going on over 100 years ago. And yet, these are still things that we can relate to today,
Absolutely.
right?
And that's what, like, I think a lot of modern writers don't get. They always want to input their views, their beliefs, their thoughts. What they don't get is the reason why Lord of the Rings is so timeless, or books like that are timeless, is because they deal with humanity,
Yeah.
not with humanity at this point in history.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when you read Lord of the Rings, the reason why it stands out is because it doesn't matter which time period you're in, you can still value sacrifice,
Yeah.
friendship, humility, honor, discipline. Those have a place in every single time period, every era of history.
Yeah.
Those have a place. And what's cool too is we as men, I'm sorry, that is how we were made to function.
Yeah.
You look at all of those societies, all these different, whether ancient Egypt and ancient Japan and ancient China and
Right.
Aztec, it doesn't matter. They had certain expectations for their men.
Yeah.
Almost every single one of them had the idea of honor or courage or discipline in there,
Yep.
or respect,
Yep.
right? This idea that you should be or responsibility was
Yep.
a big one, right?
Yep.
This idea that as a man, you should be honorable.
Yep.
Let your yes be yes. Let your no be no.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honest,
Yes.
good natured, right? Looking out for the people around you. No, that is honorable. That's an honorable life.
Yeah.
Living honestly.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to think that there were so many societies where that was valued. Not that people were perfect, right?
No.
Even chivalrous,
Yeah.
chivalry had a lot of issues, but the idea that at least they had those aspirations. And when we look at someone like Tolkien in these books, it gives us something to aspire to, because it really boils those down to their, like you said, they're almost like their peak attributes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And while I know I'll never be Faramir, what a great place to aim for.
Well, and I think one of the things we really struggle with now, and is that we go, well, that's not attainable, so I shouldn't.
So I shouldn't even try for it.
Yeah, it's this idea of like, well, we can't have these characters that are perfect because that's not realistic, and so we really need to make them really realistic. And look, there are entertaining characters, and they're entertaining stories with very realistic, fallen characters. I mean, you see it. I mean, Shakespeare did it all throughout his. Like, all of his characters were flawed, incredibly flawed, right? And so it's entertaining. I don't know if any of us though are looking at these like Shakespearean plays to go, hey,
That's
I should
who I
be
wanna
like,
be.
yeah, exactly. It's
wanna be
almost
like
like
Hamlet.
warnings, right? Yeah, it's almost like warnings about about what we shouldn't be doing.
Yes.
I wanted to ask this. So one of the things that we have talked about, in years past is, what is going on with modern storytelling, right? Modern storytelling, mostly via Hollywood, but I think now we're seeing it, more and more authors are kind of on board this modernization of, hey, we're going to look at things from our perspective, regardless of history. And we're only going to look at, we're going to have a message that we want to portray. Not that they didn't do that. Not that Tolkien didn't do that. Not that those writers didn't do that. What would you say are the differences between like the way that they approached writing and including what they saw as like values for society versus what we see now? Is it the same? Because I think that, based on like what I'm getting at is we've had conversations between contrasting Lord of the Rings characters versus like the new Star Wars trilogy characters, right? And there's obviously there's obviously very intentional. The characters are written in a very intentional way. I think in both,
yes,
right. So I guess my question is like really like, okay, do we find fault with either of these? Or if we do, where is that fault? Because I think that you can argue, well, modern storytelling is just, we have a new perspective on life, and that's the right perspective. And so we're really, using this nuanced approach to tell stories that hasn't been, told this way. Like, is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing?
So I think there's a place for both. But again, I think it comes down to whether or not the writer is actually good. And I think that's where you're seeing the issues.
Okay.
We have a lot of modern day people who are writing for Hollywood who are not good writers. Does that make sense? And I'll give you an example. Let's look at, I think it's The Last Jedi. It was the one that came out that was oh my gosh, it was horrible.
Nobody liked it.
Well, there were people who liked it, but that's because they don't understand good storytelling, but that's okay. There's a scene where they're on that planet full of rich people, right? It's like the big casino.
Sure.
And they release the animals and they destroy a bunch of stuff and then they escape. And they're like, I just remember sitting there being like, they didn't free any of the slaves. They didn't help anyone. They just did a bunch of damage and left. And then they're like, I remember the quote from, I think it was from John Boyega's character. I can't remember, Finn, I think it was. And he was like, yeah, man, we really hit him where it hurt. And I remember sitting there being like, okay, hang on. You freed no slaves. You destroyed a bunch of stuff. So now what do you think's going to happen? You just gave the slaves more work. You helped no one. You just made their lives worse. But who feels good? Right. I do. Right. Oh, I really hit them where it hurts. That is the most modern day, and forgive me for saying this, but the modern day leftist viewpoint, right? Yeah, I burned down a city block. Yeah, I burned down a Starbucks. Yeah, I helped make society better. And it's like, no, you didn't, dude.
Right.
You literally just caused more pain and misery, but it made you feel good because you got your little emotions out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All of the writing is very immature writing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like that scene right there tells me everything I need to know. That writer was like, yeah, smash the patriarchy, smash capitalism.
Right.
And you're like, you did nothing but hurt people.
Yeah.
You may have hurt some bad people too, but do you really think they care? They're just going to build it back up. They're
Okay, so I'm trying to understand the actual question then, because like,
yeah.
Well, I'm trying to finish my answer. I had 2 parts.
Okay, sorry. I was gonna make. Can I ask this? Maybe I just want to see if I'm on the right trail with where you're answering that. My question is then, are they using the same mechanics, but their target of what they think an optimal character is like is different, or did they change the mechanics?
Well, that's what I'm trying to get to.
Okay, sorry.
Exactly, but that's okay. So we have that scene, right?
Yep.
Okay. Let's look at something like, trying to think of another like a contrasting example that wouldn't be completely opposite. If we look at something like Lord of the Rings, though, and we look at Boromir's fall, it's done in a very realistic, human, and understandable way. Right, and then you see after he falls, what does he immediately do? At first, he kind of lashes out, right? Like, oh, you're gonna take the ring to Sauron, you're gonna betray us. And then you see him overcome by grief. All of a sudden, the realization of what he does sets in, and he just starts bawling, right?
Yeah.
Like this grown man, this warrior, and he's just like, what have I done? What have I done? The regret, the sadness.
Yeah.
And then we see Merry and Pippin in trouble, about to be captured. He steps up, defends them, and is killed defending them. And then you see that great scene between him and Aragorn where he's like, forgive me, I could not see. Right? Like you see the human aspect, right? The failure, but then you see the overcoming of that failure for redemption.
Yeah.
You know, I don't see that in modern day characters. Look at Rey from Star Wars. Did she ever make a mistake?
No.
Never one time do you see her character ever make a mistake, right? Now, we just talked about Faramir, right? Like, okay, well we have these aspirations, but what's the difference between this character that just does everything right all the time? Did she earn any of it? We see Faramir, right? You look at his character, you look at the father and the brother, and you see you can imagine how he was treated, right? Second class, right? His brother is the end all be all, his dad's aspiration. You can see where that humility actually came from.
Yeah.
Right? You could see the earned aspects of that. Aragorn is literally like 80 something years old. He's been traveling the world for 80 years, seeing the good and the bad. How many mistakes has he made to become who he is?
Sure.
Right? And it's like having good people, having characters to aspire to is a good thing.
Yeah.
But they also have to be well written. Right?
And I think that's where my question.
And I think that's where I'm struggling is you have a lot of almost unearned, unmerited perfection.
Yeah.
And that's where I think I draw the line. But again, we bring it back to what your question is. What's changed then? I think it's the people who have changed, the actual writers, what we value as a society and what we value as people. Do we value virtue or do we just value that external performance of virtue?
I think my question is also centered around like our values have changed. Values have absolutely changed. And I think that you could very easily say Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, all these guys, these writers at this time are really echoing values that we could probably find going back probably hundreds, if not thousands of years. Very, very what I would call traditional values.
Yep.
And what we see now what I think we see now in modern storytelling is a departure from an intentional departure from traditional values.
Absolutely.
For the sake of pushing agendas.
Absolutely.
But my question then becomes, okay, and this is, I didn't phrase it very well. I think it was because I was processing what I wanted to ask as I was trying to ask it. What is the difference between Tolkien's agenda and Star Wars, the new Star Wars agenda? Why would we, because I think we could argue, I would tend to say, I think Tolkien's agenda is good. And I would say that the new agenda, I think, is detrimental.
Well, the new agenda for the new Star Wars was stated in The Last Jedi. Forget the past, kill it if you have to. All the stuff that came before, it's not, well, we know better now. We're better now. It's said in the movie. In fact, Rian Johnson talked about that. We need to forget about nostalgia. And they weren't as good as we thought they were anyways. It's just nostalgia that makes them good. And that's why he broke down and destroyed Luke and made him a terrible character. That's why they kill off Han Solo, make him an idiot, right? He leaves his wife and his kid.
Yep.
Abandons them.
Yep.
Right? They destroyed every aspect of what came before. Because how do you destroy a tree? What do you attack?
It's roots.
It's roots. Because you don't attack the roots. I can tell you now, we chopped down 2 trees in my backyard. One of them is now literally another tree. It's regrown. The other one is a freaking bush, and I have to get rid of it because it's in our garden, but stuff just starts growing out of it. And you're like, oh my gosh, will you die?
Yeah.
What do you do to kill a tree? You got to attack its roots. And when it comes down to this, you see modern storytelling, the entire goal is to destroy, like you said, what came before it, and now offer up something new. But in order to offer something new, you have to destroy what came before.
So then is the question then arguing like have them the approach to writing changed, or is it simply like I said, is it what they deem as honorable or
yes
changed?
That's what I'm asking. Has it changed, and if so, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
I would say it has not changed. I would say the target has changed.
Okay,
my mic
that.
is really far away from my face. I don't know how much of that even got picked up.
Actually, I think I know what you're saying, and I think you're actually agreeing with him. No, go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking as I'm going here.
Go ahead.
My thought is the approach to writing, in the sense of like what they're doing, is the same. Both people are taking their agenda. We're gonna use that word.
Yeah.
We use it negatively, but I'm gonna kind of try to
neutralize
it's
what they want to portray.
Like, Tolkien had an agenda.
Yes.
Right? He wanted to portray his views on what an ideal society, man, in world could be like through, and he used tools that were realistic, but he is essentially making these characters that are archetypes and are optimal. Like some of them are achievable and some of them are just not. Right? He made that choice, but he's putting his values in there.
Yeah, his agenda.
Current writing is still doing the same thing. We are putting characters like Rey out there, and these are their values. We are seeing what they see as value.
What is Rey value, though? By the way,
that's the point, though. Like we are disagreeing what they think are values. So, like for example, Rey, like when you mentioned that she didn't have to work for anything, that is reflective of modern values, right?
Yep.
Modern values are you don't
Good
earn
call.
things, you are entitled to
Yes,
them
you're entitled
because
to them.
the dent of your sex, gender, how you identify, whatever it is, that is what gets you the thing, and that is what they believe. But the mechanics are both there. They're still creating these characters
Yeah.
Yep.
that are the optimal versions of what they value.
Yep.
And that's what I think he was trying to say.
That's
Yeah.
what
Was
so
that,
I'm
that
saying.
again,
I don't
we're
think that's
still
a,
writing mechanically. It's
so
the same, but
I would
comes
argue
down
that
to-
even when you said there are worse writers, I don't. Personally, I agree with you. I think the writing in modern entertainment is hot garbage.
but it's
Yeah.
very
But
shallow, is what
it's
I
very
would say.
shallow. But that's why I think it's hot garbage. Like there's no character development. However, like does that make them bad writers? Technically, we're judging it by how well it makes money and if there's an audience for it. Like that,
Sure.
I
So-
think there are objective ways to judge writing
I think there are
and
too.
just logical conclusions on stories, right?
Yeah.
And when you're like
And
that
character
makes
development and
literally
feeling
no
like you're
sense.
emotionally tied. I
Yes.
think all these things are there. And I
And-
think some of them, I haven't seen enough modern entertainment to be like all of them suck. I think Disney is
Yes.
knows
Disney
Disney knows they
sucks.
can print money. Disney is hiring. I don't know who they're hiring. They're just trying to crank out more money. So
Yes.
I'm not using them as the baseline
Yeah.
anymore for
Yeah.
modern media. So that's kind of why I didn't want to jump on that.
No,
I'm like,
no.
I agree that those are very bad writings.
Yeah, no, I just picked that up because that's something the three of us have had a conversation on, and that's something that I think is, I would say, easy to contrast against what we're seeing here. You're seeing two different types of
I do
values.
want to point out, like, so I do think that they are using the same roughly mechanics. We know that there's really bad writing
Yeah.
going on. So let's just hold that for a second. But they're both putting up their versions of optimal
Yeah.
representations of virtue.
Yeah.
I would say that regardless of how much I disagree with theirs,
Yep.
I would agree with Matt where he's talking about good writing
Yep.
in the sense of like the writer's job, you're an author, is to make me relate and feel
Yeah.
with that character and invest in the world. The way to do that is you need to tie it to some basis in reality. Whereas Tolkien is like, I'm caring about, these are elves for crying out loud. These are elves, dwarves, giants, whatever,
Yeah.
orcs, all these
Orcs.
things that don't technically exist, but you feel with them, you can relate to them
Yeah.
because the way the writing is done is it's pulling in the intrinsic traits
Sure.
that we all express, right?
Sure.
Which is one thing I think modern writing has completely abandoned because they think that the traits that give you any sort of virtue is what you're born
Are
with. So like,
superfluous.
my
for-
daughter
yeah.
can't relate to this princess because it doesn't look like her. Well, no, but has it had the same emotions? Does it go through similar
Yes.
things? Has it?
Yep.
They
Yep.
forget all of that, and they think it's only these shallow things.
Exact-
So
and I
I think
think-
that is one reason why the older writing is better, is because
Yep.
they are making sure they're pulling truths, which I think modern entertainment is trying to remove truths,
Yep.
and that's why it's
Absolutely.
I think what you just said there hit everything that we were trying to say. But
Yeah,
I think you
that's
boiled
good.
down to what we were trying to say. Again, it's like that superfluous performance or external virtues or external features, right? But there's nothing beneath them.
No.
It's just, okay, you got that because according to history, you were marginalized. So now all of your characters are going to be good and happy and perfect.
Right.
What? Like,
Right.
and maybe it's just me, but I despise that. And I'm like, I want,
Sure.
like, that's why Eowyn's such an interesting character and such a cool character. And they did her great in the movies. I will say that.
They did. Yeah.
When she's
I would agree
like,
with that. Yep.
when Aragorn asks her, "What do you fear, my lady?" and she says, "A cage, dying of old age." When all chances of deed and valor have left,
Yeah.
and there's nothing left, and I've just withered.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what a great like showing of this. And
Yeah.
again, you can even take that from history where you had shield maidens and
Yeah.
Viking history, which is still debated. But you know, you have this princess who grew up around combat and like wanting to be valorous
Yep.
and do good things for the people around her. And it's like you see the fear, but it's like, what a great character.
Dude. Yeah.
Anyone can identify that. Even I, as a man, can hear that and be like, I hear you, girl. Like,
Dude,
that's
even when she's like, and they did I thought they did such a great dramatic job. She's like, I am no man.
well, and you guys know in the book that what that comes from was the elf Glorfindel. I think it was Glorfindel at a battle long ago. This is long before Lord of the Rings. There is this. They're fighting the Witch King. The Witch King is getting away. This man who he's fighting with is like, I'm going to chase him down. He says, no, I've foreseen this. No man can kill him. The man goes, I believe it. Remember, the man goes after him, never comes back, never seen again. And so that's where the prophecy came from, that no man can kill him. And that's why he says, no man can kill me.
and she says,
And she says, I'm no man.
I'm no
And so
man.
he didn't realize he was thinking mankind. Like,
Yeah.
no, none of man can
Yeah.
kill me.
Yeah.
And it's like, there were a few people on that battlefield that could have killed him.
right.
Which technically I think Gandalf would have counted because he is a Maori, not a Maora. I can't remember how to pronounce it, but he's, I mean, basically like an angel, right? So but I think he might have counted, but then the hobbits too.
Oh, sure.
Which of course Mary stabs the Witch King in the back of the leg.
Yes.
Which, but again, it's to your point.
It is.
It's well
it's
done.
like it's so well done because even though it's this female warrior character, like I can hear that and go, dude, I get goosebumps.
But it wasn't just that she was a woman.
No.
It's that's not what gave her. It was her intrinsic values, her virtue, her character that made her capable of doing that. It wasn't just I am a woman, so therefore I can do this. It's like, no, you're a good person, and you dedicated yourself and disciplined yourself and trained, and you have that courage.
Yep.
And it was the intrinsic inside of her that made that scene so great.
And the other piece that she's true to who she is.
Yes. Yep.
Like that is who her character is. It's constantly like it's hinted at throughout anytime there's interactions with her, they're hinting at it, and then it like culminates in this battle.
Absolutely. So ladies, that's a good we were talking about Faramir for the men. Ladies, if you want to go look into Eowyn, that's a great that's a great person to look up to. Great character. Hey fellas, I thought this was a pretty good discussion. Any final thoughts? Anything else we want to add to it? I felt like we really touched on a lot of things. I love how we did hit though the modern presentation.
Yeah.
And I think that was cool at the end how you brought up Eowyn, because that is such a huge dichotomy.
Yeah.
Of characters where again it's the intrinsic what's inside of her that matters so much, not the external performance, right? And virtues. Hey fellas, great discussion. That was awesome. Those of you who are watching, I hope you guys enjoyed this. And again, a lot of times when we're talking, we're actually processing these thoughts too.
Yeah.
When you hear me talk about things, I'm actually processing those thoughts as I'm going. So I'm trying to come up with what I'm thinking. And then when Mike came in and then just boiled down what I said and boiled it down to like the perfect words, I'm like, this is why we discuss. Our goal is to pursue truth together.
Yep.
Because that's the only way we as human beings can really know what we're doing is right and what we're thinking is right. And us as men, how do we pursue masculinity? Well, we got to talk about it, and we got to look at the past. We got to look at what people thought before us, and we got to look at what we're doing. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode and had a great time discussing, again, Lord of the Rings, my favorite topic. I could talk about that all day. Yep. So thank you guys for joining us. We will see you in the next episode of Beyond the Beard.
Journey well, guys.
When this silent, you'll be alone, far from friends in life. You'll spend your evenings getting stoned to numb the ache inside.